So let's start. I'm Claire Morvan. I will introduce myself a little bit later. And without further ado, I would like to introduce my colleague, Caroline Kearney, who is the Senior Project Manager and Education Analyst here among the eTwinning team at the Central Support Service. This online seminar is about teacher competencies, and it is also within the framework of the eTwinning week. So this is the campaign who will start on the 13th of October. But we have this webinar to give you first the framework on the teacher competencies, but I'm not going too much into details because Caroline beside me is the expert, not me. And I will explain also the rules of the competition for the eTwinning week, which will start again on the 13th of October. So basically, I will pass the floor to my colleague Caroline. It will take a few seconds time for me to give her the ball. So now here's my colleague ready to speak.
Thank you very much.
I don't hear you. The mic.
So thank you very much, Claire. And thank you for this opportunity to talk to you all. As Claire mentioned, I'm going to share some words with you about competences, which are at the heart of all the eTwinning activity taking place in 2014. So, when we talk about competences, what are they? So whether we talk about people's competences or teachers' competences, the basic definition remains the same. That is to say that competences are a dynamic and complex combination of knowledge, skills, and attitudes, which lead to effective action in the real world. In other words, in order to be competent, you not only need the relevant knowledge, but also the accompanying skills and attitudes to mobilize that knowledge so that it translates into effective action in the real world. But today, we're going to be looking specifically at teacher competences. And to do that, I'd like to have a look at some existing frameworks. So the first thing to note is that at national level, there is a huge variety of approaches to the definition and implementation of teacher competence frameworks. This can range from a broad competence set list, for example, in Nordic countries such as Finland, to a much more prescriptive list in countries such as the UK, where competence frameworks are often linked to professional standards and career advancement, and that, for that reason, are much more specified and detailed. At international level, however, there is no generic teacher competence framework, which acts as a common reference point. This, however, is to be distinguished from the pupil competence framework, which does exist at European level, and you may have heard of. This is the list of 8 key competences that all young people should develop for personal fulfillment, active citizenship, and employment. And this was published by the European Commission in 2006. Thank you. So basically, at, as I said, international level, however, there is no generic competence framework. When there are such frameworks, these tend to be subject-specific. So, for example, you have the UNESCO ICT competence framework for teachers, which looks specifically at teachers' digital competence. And then you also have the European Profile of Language Teacher Education, which is another example of a subject-specific framework. But what we're interested in today is not one specific subject or area, but rather teachers' competences more generally. So, in that respect, what has the international level got to offer us? Well, in 2005, the European Commission did publish a policy document entitled The Common European Principles for Teacher Competences and Qualifications. And this looks at 3 broad areas of competence that we'll look at in the next few slides. Additionally, there has also more recently been an international literature review on teachers' competences, standards and development. And we'll also have a look at what light that sheds on the situation. So in terms of those 3 broad areas of competence I mentioned that were first established in 2005, the first in the list is teachers' ability to work with others. So of course, teachers need to be able to work effectively with their learners, which is their prime target audience. But they also need to be able to collaborate effectively with their colleagues in order to plan and implement successful learning strategies. Secondly, teachers need to be able to work with and in society. So this refers to teachers' ability to effectively work with a local community and other education stakeholders, such as parents and teacher education institutions, as well as cultural organisations such as museums and libraries, or local businesses, for example. Teachers also need to be able to prepare learners to be globally responsible citizens in society. The third area looks more specifically at how teachers should work with knowledge, technology, and information. This refers to teachers' need to have sound subject knowledge as well as pedagogical knowledge, which I will explain a bit more in the next slide. It also refers to their ability to integrate technology effectively to enhance teaching and learning. Finally, it also refers to teachers' ability to effectively manage information, whether this means accessing, analysing, validating, or critically assessing that knowledge. So, now let's move on away from those three broad areas to something a little bit more specific. So in 2011, the Commission published an international literature review which builds on those three broad areas by collating the key elements listed in national teacher competence frameworks. And what you see here are the results of that review. It's a list of commonly shared items in terms of the knowledge, skills, and attitudes all teachers need to effectively do their jobs. So let's look at the first umbrella, which is teachers' knowledge. As you see in item number 1, you have subject matter knowledge. So if we take the example of a language teacher, subject matter knowledge might be your knowledge of grammar, for example. Item number 2 looks at pedagogical subject knowledge. If we again take the example of a language teacher, this would include your knowledge of how to effectively teach grammar to students of different age groups and ability ranges. Item number 3 is pedagogical knowledge. This refers more generally to your knowledge of the processes involved in effective teaching and learning. Item 4 is your curricular knowledge. This refers to the specific content of your school or national curriculum for the subject or subjects you teach. Another item of knowledge teachers are required to have is of educational sciences. This refers to the historical, psychological, and sociological aspects of pedagogy. Item 6 looks at developmental psychology. So this refers to the theory of developmental learning, promoted by psychologists like Vygotsky, whereby students' cognitive development is dependent on their social collaboration with teachers and peers, and on scaffolding learning. Item 7 looks at issues of inclusion and diversity. So teachers need to have knowledge of how to foster equal opportunities for all learners despite their differences. They also need to be able to integrate new technologies and know how to use them to enhance teaching and learning. Item 9 refers to educational policies. You need to have a good knowledge of these and the way they actually impact on your daily practice. Teachers also need to be aware of group dynamics, learning theories, and motivational issues. And finally, but not least, of course, is your knowledge of evaluation and assessment processes, which of course is crucial, as we know that effective, formative, and summative assessment is fundamental to all learning. So if we now move away from knowledge and look more specifically at skills, as you'll remember at the beginning I said, competences are a mixture of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So let's look at the second pillar of skills, and here we have 8 items listed. So the first is teachers' ability to plan and manage and be able to coordinate their teaching. They also need to be able to use teaching materials effectively and integrate technologies. They need to be able to manage student behaviour and groups. They need to be able to monitor and assess learning, as we previously mentioned. They need to be able to collaborate with colleagues as well as outside stakeholders such as parents and social services. But they also need to have negotiating skills. Now, this might seem a little bit less immediately obvious, but in fact, it's very much linked to item number 7 you see there on the PowerPoint screen, which is the ability to adapt to multi-level dynamics. So what do we mean by this? It sounds rather complex, but actually it's not. What it means is that teachers need to be able to negotiate between and adapt macro-national policies as well as micro-level policies at school and student level. So it's that negotiating and adaptability that teachers need to be able to effectively do their job. They also need to be able to be collaborative and reflective in the way they work. This is about the ability of having self-reflection, and you're able to collaborate with peers in order to participate in professional learning communities. Lastly, teachers should be able to draw conclusions and decisions from interpreting evidence and data. This data could be data about your student learning outcomes, for example, or perhaps it might be external data which comes from an external school evaluation. Either way, teachers need to know how to interpret that data in order to be able to act upon it to improve their way of teaching. So lastly now, we will look at teachers' attitudes, which I think is a particularly interesting area. And as you will see from this short list of 6 items, the focus is very much on teachers having a large amount of flexibility and adaptability as a core value. So in the first item, teachers need to have a commitment to the subject they teach, need to have an awareness of its historical development, its current status, and its relation to other subject areas. So here we see the need for a deep concern for the place their subject holds in today's world. The second item refers to teachers' disposition to adapting to change. This is, of course, crucial when we live in such a quick-changing society where societal, political, and technological developments inevitably impact on daily teaching. Thirdly, teachers need to have a commitment to promoting the learning of all students. This refers to teachers' need to really have high expectations for all students and to give them equal opportunities despite their race, religion, or learning ability. Teachers also need to develop students into democratic citizens and encourage those principles. They also need to be fully committed to lifelong learning, which links to the last item on the list also, which picks up on the need for self-reflection and the ability to be able to question one's own practice. The idea here is that, just like students, teachers need to be lifelong learners. In order to be a successful teacher, you need to review your practice with the aim of improving it. So that was, in a nutshell, just a review of the various items which are considered to be important within teachers' knowledge, skills, and attitudes across the literature, across the national frameworks, as detected by this recent literature review. So I hope it gives you an insight into the kind of skills we're talking about. And this is just the last slide in some activities we're running here at European SchoolNet to help you develop your competences. So the first is an online course for teachers on competences for 21st century schools. So this is a course that was launched by KikoNet, which is the European Policy Network on key competences in school education. And we've launched a course to provide teachers with concrete tips on how to design and implement project-based learning and how to assess related skills such as collaborative problem solving. So registration is already launched, and you just need to click on the link you see there, and the course will start on the 17th of November. So we really encourage you to get online and take part, because I think it will be a very valuable course. The second activity I wanted to draw your attention to is the eTwinning monitoring activity, which will also be launching towards the end of October. And this will help teachers monitor how their competences develop while they implement eTwinning projects. We will give you more information about that later this month. Lastly, I wanted to draw your attention to a conference which KikoNet is also organising on how to integrate competence-based learning in education. The conference will take place on the 25th and 26th of November here in Brussels, and you're very warmly invited. This is free, and so the more the merrier. I think I just saw a question about the monitoring activity. Tatiana is asking, how should we monitor our competences? Well, in order to do that, we are creating a maturity model, which is going to be launched later this month. And the idea is that we ask teachers to look at their specific aspects of their competence, mainly collaborative competence, pedagogical competence, and their technological competence. And while they implement their eTwinning activities and projects during the year, we will ask them to monitor at which level they think they are working at. But that will be something we launch later this month, and we will have a specific webinar precisely on that, so I'll be able to go into more details then. But do watch this space if you're interested in taking part in that. But I should mention now, so that more information will be on the desktop, but I should also mention that in fact this activity will be specifically for teachers who start an eTwinning project this autumn. So you don't have to be new to eTwinning, but you have to be starting a new project this autumn in order to be able to take part. So I think someone called Pierluigi, probably in Italian, if I'm not mistaken, is saying that this is really impossible to have all this knowledge, skills, and competences. Of course, I agree with you. It's a very ambitious list I presented there. And of course, teachers are only human, so you can only expect to be able to do what is possible. But I think it's probably a good reference point because, as I said, there's so much variety in the national framework. The idea was to collate as many items as possible which seem to be common across the various national frameworks. So this is what all teachers should strive for within a lifelong perspective. Of course, professional development is very important, and that's why eTwinning is so crucial, because it will help you update your competences in that way. So Valeria Viola says her project has just started. That's perfect. So you would be eligible to take part in the eTwinning monitoring activity. Yeah, so stay tuned indeed.